My name is Camila, at my daughter's 17th birthday. My sister smashed her iPhone, then called the cops on her, and how a single moment of jealousy and betrayal shattered what should have been one of the happiest days for my daughter, and set off a chain of events that would forever change my family. It started on a crisp Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when everything feels lighter, brighter, full of possibility. My daughter Ava had been counting down to her 17th birthday for months. She wasn't the kind of teenager who asked for much. She worked part-time, excelled at school, and rarely got into trouble. All she wanted this year was a celebration with the people she loved and one special gift. She had been dreaming about a brand new iPhone, something she had been saving toward for nearly a year. As a single mother, I couldn't afford to buy it outright, but with her savings and my contribution, we made it happen. I had wrapped the box in soft pink paper, tucking it away until the right moment. I could already imagine her face lighting up when she opened it. The day of the party. Our backyard looked like something out of a magazine. Streamers in shades of blush and gold, fairy lights draped across the trees, and a long table filled with cupcakes, finger foods, and Ava's favorite strawberry shortcake with whipped cream. Music played softly from a speaker, a playlist Ava had curated herself, and for a few hours, everything was perfect. But then my sister arrived. Sophia had always been complicated, the kind of sibling who could make a room brighter or darker depending on her mood. Growing up, she had a way of turning even the smallest success of mine into a competition. When I bought my first car, she bought a newer one. When I got engaged, she announced her own engagement a week later, despite being single at the time. But nothing compared to how she treated Ava. Sophia had 2 sons, both of whom struggled with school and behavior. She blamed me, claiming I had easy parenting because Ava was naturally good. She mocked Ava's interests, calling her spoiled for liking nice things, even though Ava bought most of them herself. Still, I invited her to the party partly out of obligation, partly out of hope that maybe, just maybe, she would behave for once. At first, everything seemed fine. She arrived in a bright red dress, carrying a small box wrapped in gold foil, her gift for Ava. She smiled, hugged me tightly, and even complimented the decorations. But I could sense the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned the table like she was looking for something to criticize. Then came the gift opening. Friends and family gathered around as Ava began unwrapping presents, laughing softly as she thanked everyone for thoughtful gifts: a journal, a necklace, a set of makeup brushes. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. I handed her the pink-wrapped box. She peeled back the paper slowly, her hands trembling as though she didn't want to believe what she already suspected. When she saw the sleek apple box inside, her eyes filled with tears. She turned to hug me, clutching the gift to her chest, whispering a soft thank you that I will never forget. But Sophia saw it too, and that's when everything went wrong. She stepped forward, her voice sharp and cutting, saying that an iPhone was an extravagant, spoiled gift for a teenager who hadn't worked for it. She claimed I was ruining Ava by giving her things she didn't deserve. The air grew heavy as guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to react. Ava, still holding the phone box, froze, caught between gratitude and shame. And then, in one swift motion, Sophia grabbed the box from Ava's hands, ripped it open, and smashed the phone on the patio tiles. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. For a moment, no one moved. Ava stood frozen, her lips trembling, her hands shaking, as if she had been physically struck. My own heart pounded, rage and disbelief flooding my veins. But before I could react, Sophia pulled out her phone and dialed the police. She told them Ava had stolen the iPhone and pretended it was a gift to avoid trouble. She accused my daughter on her birthday of theft. By the time the officers arrived, the party was in chaos. Guests tried to explain, some whispering, in shock, while others simply left, unwilling to witness the escalating drama. Ava sat on the porch steps, pale and silent, staring at the shattered remains of her birthday gift. I wanted to scream, to throw Sophia out, to demand she take back her words, but I couldn't risk making things worse in front of the police. Sophia played her role, perfectly feigning concern, telling them she didn't want to press charges but had to call for the sake of honesty. Her voice dripped with false sincerity as she painted Ava as a manipulative girl who had been coddled all her life. The officers, though skeptical, had to take a report. They photographed the broken phone, wrote down statements, and explained that while no arrest was being made, the incident would be logged. And just like that, my daughter's 17th birthday was destroyed not by an accident, but by the calculated cruelty of my own sister. That night, long after the guests had gone and the police car's lights had faded, I sat with Ava in her room. She didn't cry, not yet. She just stared at the ceiling, clutching the empty box as if it were a lifeline. I knew then that this wasn't over. Sophia had gone too far, not just breaking a phone, but trying to break my daughter's spirit. And I wasn't going to let her succeed. But I also knew I couldn't rush. Revenge, true, revenge takes patience, and I was willing to wait. The morning after the disastrous birthday party, the house felt heavier than it ever had before. The faint smell of cake and frosting still lingered in the air, but instead of sweetness, it carried a bitter reminder of what had taken place. The broken shards of Ava's phone had been swept away, but the damage, the real damage, was not something that could be cleaned up so easily. Ava barely spoke at breakfast. She stirred her cereal without eating it. Her shoulders slumped as though the weight of her own birthday had crushed her. Her eyes, once bright and excited for the future, were dull and tired. She hadn't cried last night, not once, but now, I could see the cracks forming. She was holding everything in, every ounce of hurt, anger, and humiliation, and I knew it would only be a matter of time before it spilled out. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that the police report would amount to nothing, that people wouldn't believe Sophia's lies, but I couldn't lie to my daughter. Not when I knew how cruel the world could be when someone was determined to ruin your reputation. The first sign of trouble came 2 days later, when Ava returned to school. She walked in quietly, hoping to slip back into routine, but teenagers are rarely so forgiving. Word had spread faster than wildfire, carried by whispers and embellished with every retelling. Some said Ava had been arrested. Others claimed she had tried to scam her own mother for a phone. The cruelest version suggested that Ava was a thief who had stolen from her aunt and lied to cover it up. The fact that none of it was true didn't matter. Gossip never cared for truth. By the end of the week, Ava was eating lunch alone. Her closest friends, unsure what to believe, began keeping their distance. Teachers looked at her with quiet judgment, no doubt having overheard rumors in the halls. The humiliation was everywhere on social media, in hushed conversations, in every sideways glance she received. It wasn't just a bad birthday anymore. It was character assassination. Meanwhile, Sophia was thriving. She called me 3 times that week, each time pretending to be concerned about Ava's well-being, yet always slipping in comments that only deepened the wound. She suggested that maybe this incident would teach Ava humility. She hinted that perhaps I had spoiled her too much, that I had set her up for disappointment. It was the same tone she had used at the party, calculated, manipulative, and designed to make her look like the rational one. But beneath her polished words, I could hear it, the smugness, the satisfaction. She had done this intentionally, not just to embarrass Ava, but to prove a point to me, that she could control the narrative, that she could destroy my daughter's happiness and, by extension, mine whenever she pleased. I didn't respond to her calls after that. I couldn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. But I began to really think about how to turn this around. Ava's pain became my fuel. I watched her retreat further into herself, no longer humming to her music as she did homework, no longer talking about her plans for college, no longer smiling when we baked together on weekends. Each small piece of joy that disappeared from her face was another reminder that Sophia's actions had cut deeper than a broken phone. It was during one of these quiet evenings that I found myself staring at the folder the police had left behind, the official record of the incident. Inside were the photographs of the shattered iPhone, the statements taken from those present, and Sophia's formal accusation. The officer's words echoed in my mind. No charges, but it's logged, a record, a permanent record. End records, I realized, could be used in more ways than one, but I couldn't act just yet. Revenge required more than anger, it required strategy. If I went after Sophia impulsively, she'd twist it around, make herself the victim, and claim I was trying to punish her for protecting the truth. No, I needed to bide my time, collect evidence, and wait for the perfect moment. Meanwhile, I focused on Ava. I met with her teachers, explaining the situation not in detail, but enough that they would reconsider any harsh judgments they had made. I reached out to her closest friends' parents, making sure they understood the truth. Slowly, small pieces of support began to return to her life, though the sting of betrayal still lingered. Still, I knew that repairing Ava's confidence wasn't enough. Not while Sophia walked around, smug and untouchable, waiting for her next chance to strike. Then, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in the mail, addressed to Ava. It was from her school principal, informing her that she had been nominated for an Academic Leadership Award, a prestigious recognition given only to students who excelled not just in academics, but in character. The ceremony would take place in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The moment I read the letter, an idea began to take shape. A way to give Ava the redemption she deserved. A way to expose Sophia not with anger, not with confrontation, but with undeniable proof of her cruelty. A way to turn her smugness into shock. Because if there was one thing I knew about Sophia, it was this: she couldn't stand being upstaged. And I was about to make sure she was. The day after the letter arrived, I sat at the kitchen table long after Ava had gone to school, staring at it like it held the key to everything. In a way, it did. That small piece of paper represented more than an award. It was a chance to reclaim my daughter's dignity and shatter the narrative Sophia had so carefully constructed. But to succeed, I would need to do more than show up at a ceremony. I would need to create a moment so undeniable, so unforgettable, that no amount of gossip could erase it. And most importantly, I would need to make sure Sophia was there, to witness every second of it. First, I began with Ava. I knew better than to tell her my plan outright. She was still too fragile from everything that had happened. Instead, I encouraged her to keep pushing forward, to focus on school, and prepare for the award ceremony as though it were any other milestone. Slowly, I saw small signs of life returning to her late-night studying sessions, the quiet hum of music drifting from her room again, and even a few tentative smiles over dinner. She didn't know what I had in mind, but she trusted me enough to believe I wasn't going to let this end the way it started. Next, I turned my attention to Sophia. It wasn't enough to simply invite her to the ceremony. No, she had to want to come. She had to believe she was walking into another opportunity to assert her superiority. So I called her, voice measured, hiding every ounce of the anger that still simmered beneath my calm tone. I told her that Ava had received an invitation to an event at school, one where parents and family members were encouraged to attend. I added a carefully placed comment about how people might still be whispering after what happened, and that I hoped the evening would help restore Ava's reputation. Just as I predicted, Sophia took the bait. She offered to come, insisting that she hated how everything had turned out and wanted to support the family through this difficult time. I could practically hear the smug smile in her voice. She didn't want to support us. She wanted to watch us squirm, see if Ava would falter under the weight of her own tarnished reputation, and leave with the satisfaction of believing she had been right all along. Perfect. But I didn't stop there. If I wanted this moment to land the way I intended, I needed to go beyond simple attendance. I needed evidence, hard proof that Sophia's accusations were false. Proof that could withstand even her manipulative spin. So I reached out to the store where I had purchased Ava's iPhone. It took some time, but I was able to obtain the purchase records, including the exact date and time. From there, I contacted the manufacturer and had the warranty information pulled, further documentation tying the phone directly to me, purchased legally and gifted to Ava without any trace of wrongdoing. Finally, I compiled a series of photos: Ava unwrapping her phone, her smiling as she tested it out for the first time, the protective case I had bought her, pictures I had taken out of simple joy at the time, now serving as undeniable proof that the gift had been legitimate. With every piece of evidence collected, I placed them neatly in a folder, not to hand over to anyone, not yet. The real reveal would come later, when it would matter most. The days leading up to the ceremony were tense, but purposeful. Ava continued to regain her confidence, though I could still see flickers of doubt in her eyes. Meanwhile, Sophia remained oblivious to the storm I was preparing to unleash. She even called me 2 nights before the event, her voice laced with fake concern. She suggested that maybe Ava should wear something a little more modest, considering what people might think. I bit my tongue and agreed, though inside I burned. I had already taken care of Ava's outfit, a stunning yet tasteful dress, one that would make her look every bit the poised young woman she had become. If Sophia thought she was going to humiliate my daughter again, she was in for a brutal surprise. When the night of the ceremony finally arrived, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Families filled the auditorium, proud parents snapping photos, teachers greeting students warmly. Ava clung to my arm, a mixture of nerves and excitement in her expression, and then Sophia appeared. She swept in with that same air of superiority, her eyes darting to Ava with a look that was part pity, part judgment. She offered a sugary smile, pretending to be supportive, but I saw the gleam in her gaze, the one that said she was waiting for something to go wrong. But this time, it wouldn't. This time, she would be the one choking on her own smugness. As the ceremony began, I could see Sophia's confidence growing. She seemed convinced that Ava's name wouldn't be called, that her reputation had already ruined her chances. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied, waiting to leave with her narrative intact. Then the principal stepped up to the microphone. She began speaking about integrity, resilience, and strength of character, about a student who had faced difficult circumstances yet continued to lead by example, about a young woman whose grace under pressure had inspired not only her peers, but her teachers as well. And then she said Ava's name. The room erupted in applause. Ava rose to her feet, stunned, cheeks flushed with pride. She walked to the stage with her head held high, accepting her award with a poise that would have silenced any whisper of doubt. But I wasn't done yet, because the real revenge, the part Sophia would never see coming, was still moments away. The applause still echoed as Ava returned to her seat, clutching the award to her chest. Pride radiated from her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For a moment, I simply watched her, letting the sight of her restored confidence sink into my memory. But I knew this was only the beginning. The true reckoning, the part Sophia would never forget, was about to unfold. The principal continued with closing remarks, speaking about the values the school hoped to instill in its students: responsibility and compassion. The words struck me with a sharp sense of irony, knowing that my sister had tried to destroy all three of those things in Ava with one cruel, calculated act. When the event officially concluded, families began gathering for photos. Teachers congratulated, students, cameras flashed, and the rooms swelled with the hum of pride and celebration. I stood back, waiting for the perfect moment, the folder of evidence resting in my bag like a weapon. Then Sophia approached. Her expression was perfectly composed, but I saw the flicker of irritation in her eyes. She hadn't expected Ava to win. She hadn't expected the school to recognize her, despite the scandal she had tried to manufacture. Still, she recovered quickly, pasting on a smile and leaning in to murmur something about how this must be such a relief for us after everything. The audacity made my skin crawl, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I asked if she'd be willing to take a photo with Ava, for the sake of family. Sophia agreed, smug as ever, clearly believing she was being magnanimous. That was when I made my move. Rather than snapping a photo, I pulled the folder from my bag and handed it to one of the teachers standing nearby. I asked her to hold it for just a moment, then turned back to Sophia with the calmest expression I could muster. I asked for everyone's attention. Parents turned, teachers looked up, conversations quieted to a low murmur. I began speaking, to humiliate Ava, but to defend her in a way that could never be undone. I explained how this night was more than a celebration of academic excellence. It was also an opportunity to set the record straight. I spoke of integrity not as a vague ideal, but as something that required action. Then, with steady hands, I retrieved the folder from the teacher and opened it for all to see. The first item I revealed was the receipt for the iPhone, purchased weeks before the birthday. The date and store logo were unmistakable. I held it high so nearby parents could see the clear proof of purchase. Next came the warranty papers, listing my name and address, followed by printed photos of Ava unwrapping the gift, her joy frozen in crisp, undeniable color. Each piece of evidence layered upon the last until the truth stood towering in unshakable dot. And then, only then, I revealed the final photo. It was the one I had taken just hours before the birthday party. Ava, glowing with excitement, holding her phone for the first time. The timestamp, captured digitally, matched the purchase date. There was no denying it. The crowd murmured, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock to quiet judgment, not at us, but at Sophia. Sophia tried to speak, to laugh it off, to claim she had been misunderstood, but her voice trembled, and her eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally she didn't have. I stood silently, letting the weight of her own deceit crush her. Then the principal stepped forward, with a measured tone. She acknowledged the evidence, calling it clear, compelling, and beyond dispute. She expressed pride in Ava for handling the ordeal with dignity, noting that such maturity was rare in someone her age. And then, almost as an afterthought, though it landed like a hammer, she added that false accusations could have serious consequences. Sophia paled. The event ended shortly after, but the whispers had already begun. Parents exchanged looks, some shaking their heads, others murmuring about how awful it was to try to ruin a child's reputation over jealousy. Teachers offered Ava additional congratulations, their praise tinged with sympathy for what she had endured. And Sophia, she couldn't leave fast enough, but as she turned to go, I caught her eye one last time. No words passed between us, but the message was clear. I wasn't done. Tonight had only been the beginning, because while the evidence had restored Ava's dignity, it had not yet delivered justice. Not fully. Justice would require something far more devastating, something that would leave Sophia wishing she had never touched that phone in the first place. That night, as Ava slept soundly for the first time in weeks, I sat awake, crafting the next stage of my plan. It was no longer just about clearing my daughter's name. It was about showing Sophia that her actions carried weight, that trying to destroy someone else's happiness came with consequences she couldn't outrun. And I knew exactly how to make it happen. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but I had been awake for hours. The calm after the storm at the ceremony only strengthened my resolve. Clearing Ava's name wasn't enough. Sophia had tried to shatter my daughter's confidence in front of her peers, her teachers, and her community. A simple apology or the embarrassment she felt last night wouldn't balance the scales. She needed to face consequences that would reach into every part of her carefully crafted life. I began the day by reviewing the folder of evidence once more. The photos, the receipt, the warranty, all of it had been presented to the school, but I knew it could do more than defend Ava. It could serve as the foundation for a larger case against Sophia, not legally, perhaps, but socially, where reputation was currency and exposure was a punishment she would never forget. By midday, I had compiled a detailed timeline of the incident, complete with digital backups of every document and photo. I included witness statements from the birthday party, friends who had seen Sophia snatch the phone, others who had watched her call the police, and several who recalled her smug remarks about teaching Ava a lesson in humility. Each account was precise, corroborated, and damning. Once the package was ready, I drafted an email addressed to several recipients, key figures in Sophia's world. Not just her friends, but also her boss, her volunteer organization, and the Homeowners Association, where she often flaunted her self-proclaimed status as a pillar of the community. The email wasn't angry. It wasn't vengeful, not in tone. Instead, it was calm, measured, and deliberate. I explained how a simple act of jealousy had escalated into a cruel public spectacle. I attached the evidence, ensuring there could be no debate about what had happened. And I made it clear that the purpose of sharing this wasn't to destroy Sophia, was to protect Ava from further harm, to ensure no one else became the target of such malice, and to hold adults accountable when they acted worse than children. The email went out within an hour. Replies began trickling in, some shocked, others apologetic for having believed the whispers Sophia had spread. But the most impactful response came later that evening, from her boss. A short, curt message. This behavior does not reflect the standards of our workplace. We will be addressing this matter immediately. The fallout was swift. By the following day, whispers had turned to open conversation. Sophia's reputation, once untouchable, was now a subject of ridicule. The same parents who once fawned over her perfect image now avoided her, unwilling to be seen aligning with someone who had been publicly exposed as vindictive and deceitful. The Homeowners Association, which she had chaired for years, announced an emergency vote to remove her from the board, citing conduct unbecoming of a community representative, and her volunteer group quietly reassigned her responsibilities to someone else, citing the unnecessary distraction her actions had caused. But the real blow came when her employer placed her on leave pending an internal review. Her career had been her pride, her social currency, her way of proving to the world that she was superior to everyone, including me. Watching that crumble was not a moment of joy but of justice, because I hadn't fabricated a thing. I had only shown the truth. Despite all this, I kept my focus where it belonged, on Ava. Each day, I saw her smile return a little more. She spoke about plans for the future, college internships, travel, things she hadn't dared discuss while burdened by Sophia's accusations. And at night, she worked on a personal project, an essay about resilience, inspired by what she had endured. She didn't know it yet, but that essay would become part of my final move against Sophia. Days later, the school announced a special assembly to highlight student achievements from the ceremony, including Ava's. They asked if she would share a few words about overcoming obstacles, a request that stunned her but filled me with pride. She agreed, though with some hesitation, still unsure of how much to reveal. But I had a different plan for that assembly. Not to humiliate Sophia, at least not directly. Instead, I would ensure that Ava's experience became a story of triumph, so powerful that it would eclipse every malicious word Sophia had tried to spread. On the day of the assembly, the auditorium was full once more. Ava stepped up to the podium, hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady as she spoke about courage as an abstract idea, but as something you hold on to when others try to tear you down. She spoke of betrayal, though she never named Sophia, and of how integrity and truth always find a way to surface. Then, at the very end, she quoted a line from her essay, one that struck the room silent. Sometimes the people who try to break you are the ones who fear your strength the most, but once the truth is out, their power over you is gone forever. The applause was thunderous. Some parents stood, teachers nodded, visibly moved, and Sophia, seated near the back, her face pale and drawn, couldn't escape the reality that every word had been meant for her. When the assembly ended, I approached her. I didn't gloat, I didn't speak. I simply handed her a copy of Ava's essay, printed, framed, and signed with my daughter's initials, a silent reminder that the story she had tried to twist would now live on, not as a tale of shame, but as one of redemption. And yet, even as I walked away, I knew the final chapter hadn't been written. Sophia had lost her reputation, her status, and her influence. But there was still one place where the truth hadn't been fully confronted: our family. And that reckoning would be the harshest of all. The morning of the family gathering arrived with an uneasy calm. It wasn't a celebration, nor was it a casual get-together. It was a reckoning, one I had carefully orchestrated to ensure there would be no escape, no denial, no room for Sophia to twist the narrative as she always had. For years, she had thrived on whispers, leveraging charm and manipulation to turn relatives against one another. But now, with her reputation crumbling outside our home, it was time for the truth to be spoken inside it, in front of those who had silently judged Ava, who had looked at me with pity, and who had quietly believed Sophia's lies. I arrived early, carrying not only the evidence but also the framed copy of Ava's essay, on artifact that had moved an entire auditorium to tears. The gathering was at our parents' house, the same home where so many holidays had been tainted by Sophia's backhanded remarks and manufactured superiority. The living room was already buzzing when I stepped inside. Cousins, uncles, and aunts filled the space with low murmurs, glancing toward Sophia, who sat stiffly in an armchair, avoiding everyone's gaze. My parents stood nearby, clearly uncomfortable, as if unsure how to navigate the fallout. I didn't speak immediately. Instead, I placed the folder on the coffee table, flipped it open, and began laying out the evidence: photos of the shattered iPhone, the receipt, the warranty, the timeline of events, and the witness statements from the party. One by one, the conversations faded into silence, replaced by the tense sound of papers being shuffled and read. Then I spoke, not in anger, but in measured, deliberate words. I recounted the events of Ava's birthday, describing how excitement had turned to horror when Sophia smashed her phone. I explained the call to the police, the baseless accusations, and the emotional toll it had taken on a teenager who had done nothing wrong. I reminded them of the school's investigation, the public ceremony where Ava's innocence had been proven, and the essay she had written that turned her pain into power. Finally, I said the words that had been burning in my chest since the night Sophia humiliated my daughter. This was not a mistake. It was cruelty, and cruelty has consequences. My mother's face crumpled with shame. My father clenched his jaw, visibly torn between anger and disbelief. But it was my cousin of whom had echoed Sophia's snide remarks at the party, who looked the most uneasy. Sophia shifted in her seat, her hands gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles whitened. She had no defense now. Every piece of evidence sat before her. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. And yet, I didn't stop there. I picked up Ava's essay and read the final lines aloud, the same ones that had silenced the auditorium. Sometimes, the people who try to break you are the ones who fear your strength the most. But once the truth is out, their power over you is gone forever. When I finished, I placed the frame on the table beside the evidence and looked at Sophia not with anger, but with something far heavier, disappointment. The silence that followed stretched long enough to feel like an eternity. Then, finally, Sophia spoke, not with the sharp defiance she was known for, but with a trembling voice, thin and unsteady. She admitted to everything, not out of remorse at first, but because denial was no longer possible. She spoke of jealousy, of feeling overshadowed by Ava's achievements, of resenting the attention she received. She tried to frame it as a lapse in judgment, but the room wasn't convinced. Too much damage had been done. Our parents spoke next, voices shaking, emotions breaking through their words. They expressed shame not only for Sophia's actions but for their own failure to step in sooner. They apologized to Ava through me, acknowledging that their silence had allowed Sophia's behavior to escalate over the years. Then, in a decision that stunned everyone, my father declared that Sophia would not be welcome at family gatherings for the foreseeable future. Not until she proved she could take responsibility beyond words. It wasn't a permanent exile, but it was a clear message. Her power to manipulate and belittle had been stripped away. In the days that followed, the weight that had hung over my household for years began to lift. Ava walked taller, no longer burdened by the cruel narratives Sophia had spun. Invitations to speak about her essay poured in from the school district, local youth programs, and even a regional writing competition. Her story had become one of resilience and strength, inspiring others who had been bullied or doubted. As for Sophia, her life unraveled further. The internal review at her workplace ended in a formal reprimand that jeopardized her position. Her social circle shrank to nearly nothing, with friends distancing themselves in quiet judgment. And though she tried, in small ways, to rebuild her image, the stain of her actions remained a reminder that cruelty, once exposed, cannot be neatly erased. But for me, the greatest victory was not Sophia's downfall. It was Ava's rise. Watching her regain her confidence, seeing her accomplishments celebrated, and knowing that she had turned pain into purpose that was justice in its purest form. And as I closed this chapter of our lives, I understood something important. Revenge doesn't always come in the form of destruction. Sometimes, it's simply the undeniable triumph of the one who was wronged, shining so brightly that those who tried to dim their light are left in shadow.